was early October. London was gripped by a spell of damp, oppressive weather. A thick grey fog had settled over the city, muffling its sounds and softening its edges. Gas lamps glowed as pale halos in the gloom. It was an evening that seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something unseen. I arrived at Baker Street just after 6. I found my friend Sherlock Holmes standing by the fire. He held a small glass vial between his finger and thumb, his keen eyes fixed upon it. His violin lay about. His pipe was cold on the mantelpiece. Both were signs his mind was fully engaged. Holmes R. Watson. You come at an opportune moment. Observe. Narrator. He tipped the vial. A single drop of dark fluid fell onto a scrap of ash-colored paper. The paper curled at the edges, releasing a faint metallic odor. Watson. A curious reaction. But what does it signify? Holmes, that is precisely what Inspector Gregson failed to ask. He concluded, with his usual lack of imagination, that the substance was mere ink. Ink, Watson. As though ink would corrode linen like acid. So, a man stands accused of forgery when the truth is far more curious. Narrator. Before I could inquire further, Mrs. Hudson appeared. Mrs. Hudson, a gentleman to see you, Mr. Holmes. And in quite a state, I must say. Narrator. A moment later, a tall, thin man entered. His dark overcoat dripped with mist. His features were pale and sharply cut, but his hands trembled as he removed his gloves. He looked at us with the desperate air of a man on the brink of fear. Visitor, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. I beg of you, sir. I am in the utmost peril. Holmes, compose yourself. Your name? Visitor Peregrine Vale. And am I to understand Dr. Watson is your confidant? I have no objection, but the matter is dreadfully sensitive. Holmes, you may speak freely before Watson. He is my friend and my chronicler. Now what has driven you to my... Narrator. Mr. Vale's eyes darted toward the window, as if fearing a presence outside. Then, with a deep breath, he began. Vale. It started 4 nights ago, at my residence in Bishopsgate. I returned late from a director's dinner. The fog was thick as wool, but when I reached my rooms, I saw something unnatural. Holmes, go on. Vale, there were shadows on my wall, moving, dancing. Yet there was no lamp in the room save the one in my hand. They stretched and writhed, like figures in torment. I assure you, I was not drunk, nor fatigued. These shadows moved with a purpose, independent of my own motions. Narrator. A chill crept up my spine. Holmes, however, remained impassive. Holmes, what form did these shadows take? Vale, whispering, human, at least. And yet, not entirely human. Their limbs bent at impossible angles. One stretched across the ceiling. Another seemed to grow and shrink. Holmes, did you smell anything unusual? Hear anything? Vale, a faint sound, like a soft, irregular tapping, as though something was walking within the walls. Holmes, within the walls. Vale. I fled at once. I spent that night at a hotel. The next evening I returned with my valet. There was nothing unusual. I almost dismissed it as a delusion. But then, last night, the shadows returned. Narrator. He paused, gripping the arms of his chair. Vale. This time I was not alone. My valet saw them too. He resigned on the spot, refused to return for his belongings. Holmes, you mentioned peril. What danger threatens you? Narrator. Vale hesitated. Then he removed a folded sheet of paper from his coat and passed it to Holmes. Vale. This was pushed under my door this morning. Narrator. Holmes unfolded it. Upon it were 3 crude, distorted silhouettes. Beneath them, in letters cut from a newspaper, were the words, "We come for what was taken." Holmes handed the note to me. The paper felt cold. Vale, this is not a prank, Mr. Holmes. Someone is watching me. My staff has deserted me. I fear these things will return. Holmes, standing abruptly, what is your profession, Mr. Vale? Vale, I am a senior clerk at the Eastgate Investment Company. Holmes, have you taken anything recently? Documents, funds, items of value. That might prompt such a threat. Vale, certainly not. Holmes, tilting his head, are you quite certain? Narrator. A long silence followed. At last Vale exhaled. Vale, I handled a confidential transaction last week. A large one. But I swear I acted within my authority. Holmes, Exchanging a glance with me, Watson, your coat. We leave at once. Watson, tonight. Holmes, tonight. Fog is the ally of those who wish to remain unseen. Therefore, it is our ally as well. Vale, but Holmes, you cannot go unprepared. The shadows, Holmes, with a thin smile. Mr. Vale, in my experience, the most terrifying shadows are cast by the simplest of lamps. Let us discover who lights yours. Chapter 2. The House in Bishopsgate. Narrator. The fog that night was a damp shroud. Our cab drifted eastward through a muffled, unreal city. Peregrine Vale sat opposite us, knuckles white. Holmes was in thoughtful silence. Holmes, murmuring, Watson, Mr. Vale's account suffers from one conspicuous absence. Watson, and that is? Holmes, a motive. Shadows do not menace for sport. Someone seeks something from him. We must ask, why Vale, and why now? Narrator. Vale shifted uneasily. Vale, I have told you all I know. Holmes, not looking up. Men often believe that. Yet I have made a career of uncovering the concealed corners of memory. Even you, Mr. Vale, may possess knowledge your conscious mind has not yet recognized. Narrator. I saw a tremor cross Vale's jaw. Holmes noticed it too. Holmes, we shall return to that. Narrator. The cab stopped on a narrow street. Tall, gaunt buildings loomed. Vale's rooms were in the third house. Holmes stepped out, inhaling the air. Holmes, curious. Watson, what is? Holmes, the fog settles unevenly here, as though disturbed by recent motion. The air in front of Vale's building is thinner. Agitated. Watson, could it not simply be the wind? Holmes, affectionately reproachful, you know as well as I that there is no natural wind tonight. Narrator. We approached the building, a tall, narrow structure with a heavy oak door. Vale unlocked it with trembling hands. Watson, whispering, Holmes, do you truly believe an intruder was just here? Holmes, finger to lips, silence. Narrator. Inside, the corridor was dark. Vale lit a small lamp. We ascended to the second floor. A faint, sharp scent hung in the air. Watson, it smells as though something has been burned. Holmes, indeed, but not with flame. This is the residue of a chemical reaction, possibly phosphorescent. Narrator. We reached a landing. Vale pointed to a door. Holmes approached it with caution, running his fingers along the lock. Holmes, someone has tampered with this recently. The metal is warmer than the wood. Vale, but I locked it myself this morning. Holmes, then either someone entered before dawn, or the lock is not as secure as you think. Narrator. He pushed the door open. The room was a modest study. The air was colder, the metallic scent stronger. Holmes, Watson, closed the door. Narrator. I did so. At once Holmes extinguished Vale's lamp. Darkness swallowed us. Vale, softly, Holmes. Holmes, quiet. Narrator. We stood in silence, my eyes strained. Then, a ripple skimmed across the far wall. Watson, Holmes, did you? Holmes, yes. Remain still. Narrator. A shifting shape, bending where no arm should bend. Vale clutched my sleeve. Vale, they are here. God help us. They have returned. Narrator. Holmes moved forward 2 deliberate steps. Holmes. I see. Watson, you see them. Holmes, I see the source. Narrator. He struck a match. The tiny flame revealed a tall, narrow mirror positioned at an angle beside the bookcase. Watson, Holmes, I do not understand. Holmes, look closer. Narrator. The matchlight trembled. The mirror was slightly curved, distorting our silhouettes into grotesque, elongated forms. With the faint light and fog, the reflections seemed to shift and dance. Watson, but the mirror cannot move by itself. Holmes, no. Which is why its position is of greater significance than its form. Narrator. He inspected the frame. Holmes, it has been moved recently. There are drag marks on the floor. Someone positioned it here deliberately so that light from the street would create exaggerated shadows on the opposite wall. Vale, and the tap. Narrator. Holmes turned to the window. The pane bore a smear of a translucent, sticky substance. Holmes, phosphorus paste. When it dries and shrinks, it cracks. The cracking produces small, irregular tapping sounds, especially in cool weather. Vale, then. The shadows, the sounds. Holmes. Deliberately. Someone wishes you to believe you are haunted. It is an elaborate fraud. Watson, but to what end? Narrator, Holmes did not answer. Instead, he knelt near the baseboard. He reached into a narrow gap and withdrew a small object, a folded scrap of black cloth, coated in fine powder. Veil, what? Holmes, opening it, a glove. A child's size, and dusted with charcoal. Watson, charcoal. Holmes, to darken the hand, so that if it appeared fleetingly in the fog through the window, say it might create an unnatural silhouette. Narrator, Holmes stood slowly. Holmes, someone, Mr. Veil, is orchestrating a campaign of psychological torment against you. Someone with access to this room. Someone who knows your habits. Someone who expects you to fear the shadows rather than uncover the truth behind them. Narrator, Veil collapsed into a chair, face in his hands. Veil, but who? Narrator, Holmes fixed him with a penetrating stare. Holmes, that is the question you must now answer. Chapter 3. The Eastgate Investment Company. Narrator. The next morning, Holmes was restless. Veil arrived shortly after 8, looking anxious but less terrified. He carried a small portfolio. Veil, Mr. Holmes. I have brought the information you asked for. Holmes, excellent. Sit, Mr. Veil. Watson, your notes. Now you mentioned a colleague, Alaric Fenwick. Tell me everything. Veil. He is the senior accounts examiner at Eastgate. He has been with the firm 10 years, 2 more than I. Though I outrank him, he ambitious is. Holmes, ambitious. That word often conceals a multitude of sins. Veil. He is precise to the point of obsession. Meticulous. Capable of maneuvering himself into favorable positions. I would not call him dishonest, but he has a way of aligning circumstances to his advantage. Holmes, does he resent you? Veil, pausing, yes. Quite deeply, I fear. Holmes, and why should that be? Veil, because I recently oversaw a transaction he expected would be his. It involved large, discreet private accounts. The company entrusted me instead of him. Holmes, eyes brightening, I see. And what did this transaction involve? Veil, the movement of funds and sensitive documentation. Nothing untoward that I was aware of. Holmes, tapping his fingers, and yet someone seems to feel that something was taken. Narrator. Veil opened his portfolio. Veil, I have here the ledger entries and my notes. Perhaps something will strike you as unusual. Holmes, accepting them. Watson, accompany Mr. Veil. We leave for Eastgate immediately. I wish to speak with this Mr. Fenwick without forewarning. Veil, you intend to confront him? Holmes, smiling thinly. I intend to observe him. Narrator. The Eastgate Investment Company was an imposing stone building. Inside, clerks worked with rhythmic precision. An elderly man, Mr. Pellington, the chief registrar, approached. Pellington, Mr. Veil. We were informed you might be absent today. Veil, I have returned for a brief appointment. This is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. They are here to conduct a private inquiry. Pellington, bowing slightly, of course. I am Mr. Holmes. We are here to speak with Mr. Fenwick. Pellington, he is in his office. However, he has made it clear he is not to be disturbed unless Holmes. Interjecting, unless the matter is urgent, and in the interest of the company as a whole, which I assure you it is. Narrator. Pellington led us to a door marked A. Fenwick, Senior Examiner. He knocked and opened it. Pellington, Mr. Fenwick, you have visitors. Narrator. The man who rose was tall, rigid, and sharply defined. His hair was combed with mathematical precision. His eyes held a cold, analytical glint. When he saw Veil, his expression tightened. Fenwick, Peregrine, I had not expected your return. Veil, Mr. Fenwick. This is Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Holmes, stepping forward, Mr. Fenwick. I am looking into a matter related to Mr. Veil. Fenwick, indeed. And how might that concern me? Holmes, we shall discover that shortly. But first may I ask where you were last night, between 9 and midnight? Fenwick, stiffening, I was at home. Alone. Holmes, a convenient alibi. Unverifiable but convenient. Fenwick, I hope, sir, you are not implying anything improper. Narrator. Holmes stepped past him, surveying the office. It was exceptionally neat. Holmes, your office is meticulously organized. One could almost mistake it for a surgical theatre. Fenwick, I take pride in my work. Surely that is no crime. Holmes, on the contrary, it is admirable. And yet, narrator, he paused at a bookshelf, withdrawing a ledger with a dusty spine. Holmes, you have not opened this in some time. Fenwick, his face twitching, it contains inactive accounts. Holmes, turning a page, does it? Curious. Several of these clients are tied directly to the trust Mr. Vale has been handling. Fenwick, those accounts, without my consultation. Holmes, shutting the ledger, so you do resent Mr. Vale. Fenwick, flushing, resentment is irrelevant. The company makes its decisions. Holmes, stepping closer, allow me to be plain. Mr. Vale has been the target of a deliberate campaign of intimidation. Shadows projected in his room. Phosphorus paste to simulate noises. Objects placed to inspire terror. Narrator, a flicker crossed Fenwick's eyes. Fenwick, are you accusing me? Holmes, smiling without warmth, I am merely observing you. Fenwick, I had no reason to torment Vale. I have bigger matters to contend with. Holmes, indeed. What matters? Narrator, Fenwick hesitated. Holmes saw it. Holmes, there is something you are withholding. Fenwick, looking away, I can say nothing. Holmes, even if your silence places Mr. Vale in danger. Narrator, Fenwick exhaled. Then, in a low voice, Fenwick, not danger from me. Holmes, then from whom? Narrator, Fenwick's jaw tight. He stabbed a finger toward Vale. Fenwick, ask him. Ask him what was in the documents he signed. Ask him whose accounts were transferred. Ask him who stood to lose the most. Narrator, Holmes turned to Vale, who had gone pale. Holmes, softly, Mr. Vale, is there something you have not told us? Vale, lips trembling, I handled the accounts exactly as instructed. I did not question the names. Holmes, and what names were they? Narrator, Vale swallowed hard. Vale, Holmes, some of them were dangerous men. Narrator, a cold silence. Holmes, names, Mr. Vale. Narrator, Vale hesitated, then whispered. Vale, the Varney Syndicate. Narrator, even I felt the shock of it. Holmes's face grew grave. Holmes, quietly, Watson, this case has just become far more perilous than we imagined. Narrator, Watson, no name in London's criminal underworld carried a darker resonance than the Varney Syndicate. Their operations were whispered about, intricate, calculated, and evading prosecution for a decade. Holmes received the revelation with a chilling stillness. He stood at Fenwick's desk, his gaze fixed on some distant point. Holmes, Mr. Vale, I must ask you to recount with utmost precision the details of this transaction involving the Varney accounts. Fenwick, derisively, he will not. He cannot. He signed documents he did not truly read. Vale, I assure you. Holmes, raising a hand, let us not quarrel. We require clarity. The accounts, Mr. Vale. Vale, unsteady, there were 4 of them, each belonging to a different patron, all controlled by the syndicate. They requested consolidation into a single trust, under an alias. The transfer was meant to attract no attention. I executed the instructions exactly as provided. Holmes, and who provided those instructions? Narrator, Vale hesitated. Fenwick folded his arms. Fenwick, yes, Vale. Pray enlighten us. Vale, whispering, it came from a senior partner. Holmes, a partner? Which one? Vale, Mr. Chiswick. He oversees private acquisitions. Narrator, a sharp, silent signal passed between Holmes and me. The name meant something. Fenwick, and you question none of this. Vale, spreading his hands, orders from a senior partner are not to be questioned. You know that, Fenwick. Holmes, gently, Mr. Fenwick, your resentment is understandable, but let this not become personal. The matter has moved far beyond office rivalry. Narrator, Holmes then addressed Vale with renewed intensity. Holmes, these shadows, the tapping, the glove, the phosphorescent residue, these are tools of fear. Someone seeks to terrorize you. And now, with the syndicate's name attached, the motive becomes clearer. Vale, breath hitching, you believe? They want something I possess. Holmes, tapping his head. Perhaps not materially, but you know something. Or someone believes you do. That is enough. Fenwick, pale. Holmes. If the Varney Syndicate is involved, Holmes, they very likely are. But the question is whether they seek to reclaim something, or to silence Mr. Vale entirely. Narrator, A heavy silence filled the room. Holmes, now then, Mr. Fenwick. If you wish to extricate yourself from this mire, you must provide every piece of information you have withheld. Narrator. Fenwick's face contorted with indecision. But under Holmes's penetrating gaze, he sighed and nodded. Fenwick, very well. There is something. 3 weeks ago, I found an irregularity in one of the Varney accounts. A large sum had vanished. Not transferred, vanished. When I raised it with Chiswick, he dismissed it with unusual hostility. Told me to leave it alone. Holmes, and did you? Fenwick, I tried to. Until Vale was assigned the consolidation. I realized then that someone wished to move those accounts quickly and quietly, through someone who would not ask questions. Vale, looking stricken, you think they used me? Holmes, more than that, Mr. Vale. They may believe you know where that missing sum has gone. Vale, but I have no idea. Holmes, which makes your terror all the more dangerous. Narrator. Fenwick sank into his chair. Fenwick. Holmes, if the syndicate suspects Vale holds information even mistakenly, they will not rest. Holmes, his eyes flickering with concern indeed, which is why we must act with utmost speed. To Vale, have you noticed anyone following you? Vale, shaking his head, no. Only the shadows, the noise, the letter. Holmes, a letter. Narrator. Vale's eyes. Vale. I received one 2 nights ago. I had forgotten it amidst the terror. Holmes, produce it. Narrator. Vale drew out a folded scrap of grey paper. Holmes opened it. Inside, in jagged charcoal strokes, were the same words. We come for what was taken. Holmes examined the texture, the edges. Then he inhaled its scent. Holmes, aha. There it is. Watson, do you smell it? Watson, stepping closer, an acrid scent. Or lacquer. Holmes, precisely. A type of wood varnish used primarily by theatrical set designers and, more importantly, illusionists. Fenwick, illusionists. Holmes, slipping the note into his pocket, it appears our culprit knows how to manipulate shadow, light and fear with the skill of a stage performer. The mirror was positioned with professional accuracy. The tapping mechanism shows knowledge of acoustics. Vale, and someone hired by the syndicate, is tormenting. Holmes, pacing perhaps. Or perhaps someone wishes you to believe it is the syndicate. There is a distinction of considerable importance. Fenwick. Holmes, what do you suspect? Narrator. Holmes's eyes sharpened like steel. Holmes, I suspect that someone in your company, someone with access, influence and knowledge, is manipulating Vale. Whether in league with the syndicate or attempting to deceive them remains to be seen. Fenwick, whispering. Chiswick. Vale, surely not. Holmes, holding up a hand. I do not yet accuse him, but I intend to speak with him. Fenwick, paling. Holmes, do not confront him directly. If he is involved with the syndicate, he will be dangerous. Holmes, thin smile. My dear Mr. Fenwick, danger and I are on speaking terms. To me, Watson, fetch your coat. We go at once to meet Mr. Chiswick. Vale, but Holmes, what of me? Holmes, placing a firm hand on his shoulder, you will accompany us. I do not intend to let you wander London unprotected. Fenwick, rising abruptly. I will come as well. Holmes, raising an eyebrow, afraid to remain alone. Fenwick, swallowing enough to join you, yes. Holmes, faint smile, very well. Striding toward the door. For now, we hunt in daylight. But gentlemen, do not be deceived. This case belongs to the night, and so do those who seek Mr. Vale. Narrator. With that, we departed, unaware that even as we stepped into the fog, unseen eyes were already tracking our movements. Chapter 5. The Trap in the Garden. Narrator. The following evening, Holmes declared the hour had come to dislodge certain truths. We returned to Vale's Bishopsgate residence. Under Holmes's direction, we staged a scene. A small unlit lantern was placed by the garden's west wall. A discarded glove, a charcoal stick, and a folded moat were arranged as if carelessly left behind. To the untrained eye, it was nothing. To the patient observer, it was an irresistible invitation. Holmes, Vale, Fenwick, and I took concealed positions. Lestrade and 2 constables were hidden nearby. The fog was our co-conspirator, thick and silent. Holmes, whispering, observe. Watson, everything in place. Now we wait. Time stretched. Then a movement. A tall, cloaked figure emerged from the fog beyond the hedge. Its steps were measured, careful, It moved toward the west wall. Holmes, icy precision, he takes the bait. Narrator. The man crouched near the objects, examining them with meticulous attention. His fingers hovered over the glove, the charcoal, then the folded note. Holmes's hand moved, signaling for patience. The figure unfolded the note. His face, hidden beneath a hood, twisted in surprise, then curiosity. He looked around the garden. Holmes rose and stepped forward, his cane tapping lightly on the cobblestones. Holmes. And evening. Narrator. The figure froze, his head snapping toward the sound. He assessed the situation with cold, methodical precision. Holmes. I wondered when you would arrive. You have been busy and diligent, but all diligence has its limits. Figure. Low, measured voice. Sherlock Holmes. You set a trap, and I am the mouse. Do you imagine I will remain so easily caught? Holmes. I do not imagine. I calculate. Narrator. The figure Muller moved with predatory grace, circling the lantern. Holmes matched every movement. It was a silent duel of intellect in the fog. Muller. You are cleverer than I anticipated. But cleverness alone does not protect against desperation. Holmes. Desperation is a temporary advantage, Mr. Muller. And your methods have made one critical error. You underestimated the patience of those who study shadows. Narrator. Muller's hand twitched toward the glove. In a flash, Holmes seized his wrist with an iron grip. At the same moment, Lestrade and the constables emerged from the fog. Lantern beams cutting through the gloom. The trap was complete. Muller ceased struggling. His pale, refined face showed no ordinary fear, only grudging respect. You are now in our custody, and you will answer for the shadowed manipulations that have brought terror here. Muller, slight, twisted smile. Clever, Holmes. But know this, shadows are not so easily confined. Even in chains they may speak. Holmes. Every shadow has a source, and every source can be traced. Your end is not in threat, but in inevitability. Narrator. As Muller was led away, Holmes and I stood in the lifting fog. Watson. Observe how the criminal mind mirrors that of the detective. Both manipulate, anticipate, and deceive. Muller was brilliant and dangerous, but he misjudged patience and observation. That is where the game was lost. Watson. And the Grey household. Is it safe now? Holmes, turning his gaze to the city. Safe enough for tonight. But never forget, Watson. Danger often lingers in quiet places, in corners unlit, in shadows that sway just beyond perception. Chapter 6. The Unraveling. Narrator. The next morning in Baker Street, Holmes sat before the fire, a serene look of satisfaction on his face. Holmes. Watson. The case of the dancing shadows teaches a lesson beyond the capture of a criminal. It demonstrates that intellect, applied with patience and moral clarity, can triumph over the darkest designs. Watson. It was a symphony of fear, calculation, and observation. Precisely. It was not chaos, though it appeared so. Every trace Muller left, the clay, the chalk, the lantern flashes, was a statement of his method. But method cannot withstand the scrutiny of meticulous deduction. Muller sought to make veil fear shadows so he would not see the man casting them. He used the reputation of the Varney syndicate as a spectre to magnify that fear, but his greatest tool, deception, became his undoing when met with a mind that refused to be deceived. Watson. And Chiswick? The senior partner. Holmes. A pawn, albeit a greedy one. Fenwick's information led Lestrade to him. He was embezzling from the syndicate's accounts and used Vale's unquestioning diligence to cover the trail. The dancing shadows were his insurance to make Vale appear unstable, his testimony unreliable should the fraud be discovered. He hired Muller for his theatrical genius. But he did not account for a detective who sees the stagehand, not just the spectre. Watson. So the Varney syndicate themselves were not directly involved. Holmes. Not in this theatrical terror. They are undoubtedly searching for their missing funds. Chiswick's fate, now that his scheme is exposed, will likely be far swifter and less merciful than anything British justice would deliver. A sobering thought. Narrator. Holmes rose and looked out the window at the ordinary, gaslit street. Holmes. The shadows danced, Watson, and we learned to read their steps. We may retire, secure that patience and reason have triumphed. Yet remember, the mind that studies shadows always perceives more than the eyes alone. Narrator. I felt a profound reassurance. For though the city slept on in ignorance, here in Baker Street, shadows were deciphered, and justice, though sometimes delayed, was realized. Holmes reclined in his chair, the image of serene mastery, and I, his chronicler, reflected on the true marvel, not merely apprehending criminals, but comprehending the subtle workings of the human mind and restoring light to a world perpetually threatened by shadow. Narrator, Watson. Later that evening, the fire crackling in the hearth at Baker Street, Holmes finally laid out the complete tapestry of the case. He sat with his fingertips steepled, his eyes reflecting the flames. Holmes, the mechanism, Watson, was elegant in its simplicity. Fear is the most potent weapon, for it blinds the intellect. Our adversary knew this, Watson. But the specifics, Holmes. The how of it all still rattles my nerves. Holmes, then let us begin at the beginning. The goal was not to harm Vale physically, but to break his nerve and his credibility. To make him appear a man haunted by phantoms of his own guilty conscience. Narrator. He leaned forward, the spark of the lecturer in his eyes. Holmes, first the stage, Vale's own study. A room he knew intimately, thus making any alteration to it more psychologically potent. The bent mirror was the cornerstone. Placed at a precise angle, it would catch the faint, diffused light from the street lamp through the fog. Any movement in the room, a swaying curtain, a passing cab's light, would be warped by the curved glass into those grotesque, dancing silhouettes upon the opposite wall. Watson, and the tapping. Holmes. Second, the soundscape. Phosphorus paste, painted thinly on the window pane. As it dries, it contracts and cracks with a series of soft, irregular pops. In the dead silence of the night, a man already on edge would interpret it as footsteps within the walls. A simple chemical trick, but profoundly effective. Watson, and the glove. The charcoal. Holmes. Third, the tangible proof. The child's glove, blackened with charcoal dust, was the masterstroke. It was a prop, Watson. On the night Vale saw the shadow stretch across the ceiling, I believe Mueller, or an accomplice, held this glove on a wire or rod, briefly silhouetted against the window. It provided the fleeting, impossible shape. Later, planted where we would find it, it served as a physical token of the unreal, a seed of doubt that the phenomena were supernatural. Watson, but why go to such elaborate lengths? Why not simply threaten Vale with a note? Holmes, a note is a threat from a man. A dancing shadow is a threat from the unknown. The latter is far more paralyzing. Chiswick, through Mueller, was not just threatening Vale, he was constructing a narrative. The narrative was that Vale, by meddling with the Varney accounts, had invoked a spectral, inexorable vengeance. We come for what was taken. It was a message meant to unhinge him, to make him flee or confess to anything to make it stop. Watson and Fenwick's role. Holmes. Fenwick was the unintended catalyst. His honest discovery of the discrepancy forced Chiswick to accelerate his plan. Fenwick's resentment made him a suspect in our eyes, a useful red herring. But his real value was his knowledge, which he finally surrendered out of a fear greater than his jealousy. Narrator. I poured 2 glasses of brandy, handing one to Holmes. Watson. And Mueller himself. Who is he? Holmes. Sipping his brandy, Johann Mueller, as he calls himself, is a craftsman of perception. A failed stage illusionist turned to a more lucrative form of deception. He sells fear as a service. His tools are not revolvers and cudgels, but light, shadow, sound, and psychology. He is an artist of dread. Watson, and he was watching us in the garden, even as we laid the trap. Holmes, of course. A man of his vanity could not resist. He had to see if his work had drawn the famous Sherlock Holmes. He had to observe his audience. His flaw was that he believed himself still backstage, invisible. He did not realize that by watching us, he had finally stepped into the light. Watson, it chills the blood to think of such a man at large. Holmes, but he is not at large, Watson. He is in a cell. And more importantly, his method is exposed. The terror of the unknown vanishes the moment you understand the gas jet and the painted glass. Narrator. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The case was closed, yet its eerie atmosphere lingered. Watson. Do you believe, Holmes, that such methods will become more common? This warfare upon the mind. Holmes. Thoughtfully, as society becomes more complex, so too does its crime. The brute gives way to the strategist, the bludgeon to the nerve jar. Our work, Watson, must evolve accordingly. We must become not just detectives of fact, but detectives of perception. Epilogue, a fortnight later. Narrator, a fortnight past. London had shrugged off the oppressive fog for a spell of crisp, clear autumn days. I called upon Peregrine Vale at his club. The change in the man was remarkable. Colour had returned to his cheeks, and the tremor in his hands was gone. Vale, Dr. Watson. A pleasure. Please, sit. I owe you and Mr. Holmes a debt I can never repay. Watson, nonsense, my dear fellow. Justice was served. How are you finding things at Eastgate? Vale, quiet. Surprisingly so. With Mr. Chiswick's sudden resignation, and the police inquiries concluded, a sense of order has returned. Mr. Fenwick has been appointed to oversee the reorganization of the disputed accounts. An ironic turn, but a just one, I think. Narrator. He leaned forward, his voice lower. Vale, I received a letter from the firm's senior partners. A discreet expression of regret and a substantial adjustment to my annual remuneration. A tacit acknowledgement, I believe, of my ordeal and their own lax oversight. Watson, I am glad to hear it. And the house in Bishopsgate? Vale, smiling faintly, sold. I have taken rooms in a brighter, newer building near the park, with very straight, flat mirrors, I might add. Narrator, we shared a laugh. It was good to see the ghost of fear banished from his eyes. Later that afternoon, back at Baker Street, I relayed the meeting to Holmes. He was sprawled on the sofa, seemingly absorbed in a monograph on the ashes of different tobaccos, but I knew he was listening. Holmes, a satisfactory outcome. Vale has resilience. He will recover. More importantly, he has learned a lesson about the price of unquestioning obedience, a lesson cheaper than the one Chiswick is now learning. Watson, and what of the greater lesson? The Phantom's network? Holmes, looking up, eyes gleaming. Lestrade and the River Police have been busy. 2 warehouses in Limehouse have been shuttered. A handful of minor players are in custody. The Varney Syndicate, I am sure, has already relocated its operations. They are a hydra cut off one head, another grows. But we have exposed a method. We have shown that their shadows can be dispelled by the light of reason. That, for now, is victory enough. Narrator. He returned to his monograph and I to my notebook. The case of the dancing shadows was... The spectres had been revealed as men, the curses as chemicals, the haunting as a hideous practical joke with murderous intent. Yet, as I wrote the final words of this account, I glanced at the window. Evening was drawing in, and long shadows stretched across the floor of our sitting room. For a fleeting second, my heart gave a small, familiar lurch. Then I heard the gentle scrape of Holmes's violin as he began to tune it. The sound was ordinary, human, and reassuring. I smiled at my own fancy, lit my pipe, and settled back in my chair. In a world where shadows could be made to dance, it was a comfort beyond measure to sit in the presence of the one man who could always make them stand perfectly, and accusingly, still.